Hey guys, have you ever seen somebody go up to the podium, right? They grab the microphone and they look out at the crowd and there's like a little awkward pause before they speak.
So apparently the millennials, every time we start a video, we're just looking at the camera for 3 seconds to make sure it's recording. When I seen them talking about it, I went back to look at all of my videos. Honey, why am I pausing on every single video? That's how they point us out. Now I'm kind of embarrassed because all these years I've been pausing. I swear I'm not going to stress about this.
Today's video is actually called Gen Z Stare, Myth or Truth. You ask a young person a question. Maybe your question is kind of stupid, but for whatever reason, they end up looking at you with a blank stare.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Is this all?
Yes, this is all.
Okay. Your total's gonna be $649.
I wanted to use my credit card today. Could you see if there's any rewards on it?
Now there's two trains of thought. The first train of thought is that it's something rude, right, that Gen Z does to say that you're being kind of stupid.
Tiny conversations, like you guys act like it's so mentally taxing. And I think because of therapy speech and just online, like you guys are very good at taking words and almost like weaponizing them and telling people like, well, that's because blank, that's because blank, that's because blank. It's, you guys kind of give excuses for just simple, tiny interactions that you have to do as a human. There's been so many experiences where I've been like, okay, how many people at the table? And you guys are just like, when it's obviously like 4. You know what I'm saying? Like,
now, if you ask somebody my age what they think of customer service reps, especially from the Gen Z generation, you know, the younger adults and the teenagers, a lot of times people will say they barely act like they know how to talk. They'll give you an empty stare because they're stupid and don't know what they're talking about. But in reality, it could be that they're giving you an empty stare because they really don't know what you're talking about and they're lost. It could be that they're socially inept, so to speak, or it could be that your question you're asking them comes across as goofy and dumb, and they're trying to let you know to quit asking goofy and dumb questions.
So I can't use my rewards points? Can you check?
There are no rewards.
Now, what I'm trying to figure out, is this something that is contagious and it's running through the whole generation of young people? Or is it something that we're imagining that we're seeing because maybe 1 or 2 people do? That's where you have to start to bring up comedy. It has always been comical when people ask the obvious stupid question, right? Maybe you walk up to the register and you have a watch on and you have your cell phone in your hands and you ask the guy at the register, "Sir, what time is it?" That might just get him to look at you with a goofy expression because you obviously have the ability to tell the time yourself without the needless chit-chat. Another thing that bothers some people is when you go into a business and you're about to ask somebody a question, it's not really necessary to say, "Hi, my name's Peter, how are you doing?" right? You don't necessarily have to greet somebody. But if you're from my Generation X or in my age group, you know, we kind of grew up with common courtesy. It's nice to introduce yourself and say hello. Some of the young people look at it and say, why is that needed? It's a waste of time and it's a waste of energy. Another thing that might explain this pause is energy itself. Maybe some of us older generation we're used to being positive energy when we're dealing with people in public. Maybe with the younger generation, they just don't have all the energy and steam for the niceties. What do you guys think? I would love to know your thoughts down below.
Them old boomers and Gen X'er come to the customer service, ask the dumbest questions. That's why we staring at y'all just like...
The other day I was in Walmart, and one of the things I noticed is if you ask them a question, like, where is this in Walmart? Some of them know, many of them don't. But it used to be if they didn't know where it was, they would say, hey, hold on one second, I'm gonna find out. And they would do something. Now they really do kind of stare at you like a deer in the headlights, and a lot of times they don't end up being much help at all. I've literally had customer service reps that I assume were teenagers or early 20s literally stare at me and say, I don't know. And it's like, well, you work here and you're technically getting a paycheck. Shouldn't you slowly start to memorize the store?
Y'all keep trying to push this narrative saying that, oh, Gen Z is socially inept or whatever, but that's just because y'all be trying to feel better than somebody. When I go around and talk to like a random Gen Z person, it's like they went to the same high school as my ass. Maybe because we all grew up online. Maybe because we all grew up in the same fucking place, but digital. We've been interacting with people. We've been interacting with each other. It's y'all that got this weird perception of Gen Z. It's always Gen Z this, Gen Z that. Like, y'all need to shut up.
You know, my first job ever was working at a movie theater, and I absolutely loved that job. We had a special where we had to sell like 2 drinks and a popcorn, and whoever sold the most specials got like, you know, I don't even think we made money. It was just like, hey, you sold the most specials. I wanted to sell the most specials. So everybody that came up, I asked them if they wanted to purchase the special. Now you say that to young people and they look at you and say, oh, old people are lame and goofy. And I suppose in a way, it was lame and goofy. But I think the reason we all talked to one another growing up is because we didn't grow up on screens. And I think sometimes we forget that these young people, they didn't grow up on cartoons like we did. They grew up on TV or on screens on the phone, right? And when you have access to screens on the phone, a lot of these kids that are growing up, they just kind of grew up in a different world than we did. Holy shit, it's hot out here. Be kind of cool if there was like a function on your screen where you could press a button and get an idea of how hot it was. I think you'd have a lot more respect for the walk. Remember, the walk must go on. Whenever I am sweating, there's a piece of me that feels like I'm getting a better workout out of it, you know? It's not always supposed to be fun, but at the same time, if you can get used to being uncomfortable, as David Goggins would say, it makes life a little bit easier. Get used to being uncomfy. You don't want to be that person that only takes a walk when it's perfect weather outside. Get used to going. All right, so let's talk about this. Young people are naturally not as savvy as adults. It takes a little while to get used to, you know, knowing what's going on in the world, right? So sometimes when you talk to a young person, you should expect them to have a deer in the headlights look. Are some of them rude? Yeah. But think back to when we were all teenagers. We were always trying to get people to laugh and stuff. And sometimes to get people to laugh, we treated people rudely, right? We would make them the butt of the jokes. And ever since I was young, I always remember younger people trying to make fun of older people and vice versa. One of the things that I've really started to notice as I've been walking with you guys for a long time now, because I feel like what used to feel like I just started, I don't feel like I just started anymore. I feel like, holy crap, we've been walking together for a long time now. And one of the things that I really enjoy is you guys get to kind of see how I naturally trip out on how life changes as we go through the years. There's still a piece of me, as crazy as this sounds, Sean and Mala, there's still a piece of me that thinks there's a chance that maybe I'll wake up tomorrow and I'll realize that I'm still 12 or 15 and that all this life was just a dream. Now here's the nutty thing. If that ever did happen, do you think it's possible to have a dream that literally feels like 40 years? You know? Wouldn't that be scary if you did wake up and you found out that you were still 12 or 15 and all this was a dream? You know, a lot of times you're in this dream and it only seems like it lasts for 5 or 10 seconds, you know? Dreams and sleeping have a real way of kind of messing with time and our perception of time. And there's a theory out there that we might all be dead and our life might be flashing before our eyes. And if it is, then that means in just that last couple of seconds that we're still alive, we're actually living the equivalent of, decades and decades in the world. Wouldn't that be crazy if this was all just 5 or 6 seconds of really compressed time? I don't even know how that could happen. But I swear I hear a lot of people, they might be bullshitters, but they make themselves out to be experts. And they make it sound like you can speed up time to the point where things don't move, So who knows if it's possible or not. But I'll tell you what, if I did wake up tomorrow and I was 12 again, knowing what I know now, I would take over the world. Would you have everybody walking? Hell no. As a 12-year-old, I would not do that. Tell you what I would have done differently, though. I would have known that I was going to be 5'9" and a half and like 170 pounds. I would have given up on football and basketball, and I would have focused on golf. Think about this. If you could go back to when you were 12, knowing what you know now. Sean, even you're in IT. Knowing what you know now, would you have maybe gone a little bit of a different route to get into IT a little bit quicker? Or have you always been in it? Is there anything else that, knowing what you know now, you might have jumped into? Mala, think about the person that you are now. If you woke up tomorrow and you were a 12-year-old girl again, knowing what you know now, what would you maybe do different? These are the things that I trip out about. These are the things that make my walk more fun. The problem is, in a 25-minute walk that I edit down to 17 minutes, sometimes it's hard to spit out these thoughts that are in my head. But those are the things that I trip out on. There's no way that we can ascertain whether this world we're in is real or a dream or a simulation. Because it's kind of weird that we go to sleep at night. What are you talking about, Jesse? Are you stoned? No. It's just kind of weird. Think about this. We all kind of turn off and recharge for 6 to 8 hours every night, at least most of us. And the people that don't sleep, they literally go through a psychosis. Have you ever seen people that can't sleep? They literally lose their mind. And it just makes you wonder, why the hell do we sleep? If you live to be 100, you're going to spend probably about 25, 30 years of that time sleeping. That's crazy. What happens when we're sleeping? Do we go to a different world? Are we really a machine that's just charging? No different than the way we charge our telephone by plugging it into the, USB cord and into the wall. Interesting. Freddie, C33 says, I've been face to face, dealt with hundreds of people daily for 25 years. This video is absolutely true. People have become extremely weird. Jesse, why are you talking about waking up from a dream? Because I'm extremely weird. Nothing is how it used to be, and not for the better. Freddie, I'm glad you put that into your comment. Everybody keeps trying to sell us on the idea that we don't want to go back, when in reality, we all believe that the world we grew up in once upon a time was better than the world we're headed for. I think the phone, the internet, all the things that we're addicted to right now, I think it's killing who we really are. I think we were meant to be more sociable. I think instead of staring at each other through screens, we were supposed to be meeting each other. Wouldn't it be horrible if we were actually supposed to be friends in real life, and the only thing that was holding us back from each other was this thing called social media? It's very antisocial. Tabitha Rain's Music says, I've done the Gen Z stare before, but it's not from a place of judgment. It's legit me buffering or being confused. I'm in my head a lot. If what they say is true, where it used to be like 1 out of every 200 kids had autism, and now, and I'm just going to throw up a number, like now it's like, 5 or 6 out of every 50 have autism or something goofy like that. Well, maybe there's going to be a lot of people that are buffering. And when you ask them a question, because they grew up doing school via the internet, talking to people via text, maybe they're just going to have to stare into the darkness for a minute to gain their thoughts so they know what to say. Sometimes that happens to me, but I'd like to think it's because I'm encroaching on my 50s and I'm having a senior moment. I don't think kids in their 20s should be having that as often, but let's give them some credit. They grew up in a weird world where we were talking via text, and most of the words we use in text weren't even real words. Think about it, the most used word of all time is probably LOL. Is that crazy? Think about this. How many times a month do you and I type the word LOL? Probably way more than we should. Eric Dickerson 9080 says, just standing there staring and not answering is very rude. It's probably worse than a sarcastic comment in response. One of the things I used to have when I was younger, and I still have it now, is a nervous grin. So if you're ever in my face and talking to me and I'm smiling, it might come across as rude and condescending, but I think it's just one of those things that I naturally have. If someone's staring, it might come across as rude, but just try to remember, for at least a small percentage of people, it might just be them zoning off into zombie world. MG8132 says, millennial here. Yeah, I see it every time I go to the grocery store. No greeting, there's no have a nice day. I don't need small talk, but a simple greeting goes a long way instead of being a zombie. See, that's the thing that I agree with. If somebody says good morning to you, it's not them hitting on you. It's just them saying good morning, and when you pretend like you didn't hear them, or you stare at them as you say nothing, it literally, to me, comes across as the rudest thing ever. If you agree with me, let me know, but I'm sure you've done it. Even I've done that before. But when I did it in the past, it was because I was having a bad day. And then afterwards, I was like, God, why didn't I just nod my head and say good morning? So I've done that too, but people do it regularly. They shouldn't do that. Anyway, I love walking with you guys. If you would, hit the like button, come back again tomorrow, and we'll walk again. It's about 106 today, so it's hot, but not as hot as it's been. If you don't mind, tell me the temperature that you're walking in, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great night. Don't stare at people.